that your church might be stealing from you. In today's video, I'm going to explore some ways that you may not be aware that the church that you're going to is stealing from you. My name is Dr. Felicia, and I'm a licensed psychologist, and I have a private practice and a channel and a website. And these resources are there to help people recover from spiritual abuse as well as detect it. So, back to the question at hand. Do you know that your church might be stealing from you? Now, you might be thinking about money, and that could be the case. But I'm not going to talk about money as much in this video. As you know from my videos on this channel, I talk a lot about how spiritually abusive spaces feel entitled to two things. Do you remember what those two things are? Let me know if you remember in the comments. Those two things are your time and your resources. And so if you think about people that are entitled to things, what do? They might ask for those things from you repeatedly, or they may just take them. And I've noticed that in a lot of spiritually abusive environments, they believe that they are entitled to your time and your resources, and they actually take them without your permission. So I'm going to talk about how in this video. The first thing is through unpaid labor. And a lot of you have talked to me about this in the comments about how you do a lot for your churches, right? And you're not compensated for it. And I personally have a problem with that. Now, um, other people may not, right? People believe that you should serve an environment. And I think those two things can be true. You can serve, but you can also be appropriately compensated when necessary. And what I'm seeing is people giving and giving and giving, and they're not only like acknowledged for what they're giving, they're not even like reimbursed for it or compensated for it. And I do not think that that is fair. And so, if you are watching this and you disagree, I want you to ask yourself why you disagree with that and why you feel like it's okay for anybody to just give and give and give without any compensation. Now, I know that there are things like volunteering. I know that there are um, situations and organizations where people are going to have to chip in of their time and resources and are not going to get compensated for it. So I understand that. And this is why I said, again, I say you have to have nuance on this channel. That's not the problem. The problem is when that environment is entitled to it and keeps taking and taking and taking without any acknowledgement or asking, hey, like, is this something you want to continue? How can we reimburse you for this? Things like that, right? So that is a big thing. And you will hear this from places that really push service a lot, right? Service is not the same thing as unpaid labor. And I'm going to let you think about that and simmer on that while I go on to the next thing. So I want you to think about the differences between service and unpaid labor. In a lot of these environments that are spiritually abusive, they have this way of like, kind of like creating something. Now, you guys may have experienced this in the workplace, right? Maybe the boss or someone has this idea. And instead of running it by everybody, they just decide, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then expect everybody to chip in their time and their resources to make this thing happen. And I see that in spiritually abusive environments. And I've also heard from you all about that in this channel. If you choose to serve, that is from you, right? You're like, okay, this is what I choose to give, right? But you're not shamed into it. You're not in, people don't feel like they can just extract that from you. And another way that you'll be able to tell that this happens is because you'll be giving and giving. And then when you stop, that's when like the arrows come flying at you, right? And you may be called selfish. The pastor may talk about you without using your name in a sermon, things like that. So I just want you to be careful about that. The second way that churches and, churches, spiritually abusive environments, wherever, right, can steal from you is through your emotional labor. And how does that happen? Well, the main way that I see that happen is asking you to invest your emotional energy into somebody who's not ready to change, right? And so they kind of look at you as like a free caregiver, hospital, whatever. And I see this so many times, I've experienced this so many times. Somebody is in the church and they have problems. I'm not saying we don't help people. What I am saying is when these environments expect you to be rehab for somebody else who is not ready to change, that is exploiting your emotional energy. And this happens a lot more than you would think. So here's a challenge to you. The next time I want you to think about this actually. Have you ever been like asked to like mentor or disciple someone, and at the end of that experience, you felt so drained and so emptied and so tired, and you're like, I never want to do this again. If you feel that way, the reason you probably do is because the person that you were asked to invest your emotional energy in was not ready to change. And a lot of churches and places like this don't really understand that just because somebody is in distress and is coming to you being like, oh, I have all these problems, does not mean at all that they're ready to change, right? People can be upset about all kinds of things and even more upset when they realize what they have to do to get out of the predicament that they're in. That really is human nature. It takes a long time for people to change. And a lot of times when people change, it is because they have decided to. It is not because anybody else has talked to them or whatever. So I want you to really be careful of that. So that is the what I'm talking about, emotional labor, right? Investing your energy and resources into someone that doesn't want to change. The third way is through your spiritual labor. And it's similar to the one I just described, but in this case, you are being asked to pray for somebody who is not ready to change. I see this a lot in abusive relationships, actually. And so, when I've worked with people who have been in abusive relationships and they have gone for, spiritual, counseling or whatever, which is a whole other thing I'm going to talk about in another video, but through people in their church. A lot of times when at least in the things that I've seen, these people are not qualified to provide that kind of service to people because they're not licensed, they don't have the proper education. And so as a result of that, they tell them to do things that are actually even more damaging. So instead of giving a person who is being abused like resources and support and leaving the abusive spouse or partner or whoever it is, that environment, they'll be told, well, just pray for this person. And just pray for this person, just pray for this person, just pray for them. But you can pray for someone and do something about it, right? And if we even, if we look throughout, our own lives, looking even at the Bible as an example and what people have done in certain situations, they prayed, but they also did things too, right? They may have prayed and been told, okay, do X, Y, and Z. And so when people are in these abusive situations and they're told, well, just pray for this person, um, then that is causing that person to put their own spiritual energy and resources into a bucket with a hole in it if that person is not willing to change. And usually, in the situations that I have seen and assessed and heard about, the spouse was not willing to change. And prayer is prayer, but prayer needs to be accompanied by something. And so I really want you to think about that and think if you have been exploited in any of these areas. And again, this doesn't even have to be like an abusive partnership or marriage. When people sometimes are in these places and they're experiencing difficulty in whatever situation it is, instead of being given practical resources and being told, hey, you're in a situation here that's not good. This is what you need to do. They're not given that information. Instead, they're just told to pray. And if they try to go about doing things in a way that's going to give them peace or give them, I'm looking for the word escapes me right now. Okay, it's autonomy, agency. Being able to leave that situation, sometimes they're even criticized for that. And so anyway, I have talked about three ways in which these environments take from you and steal from you. And I want you to think about that because when people think about spiritual abuse, they tend to think about it in these ways that are they're accurate, but they're not necessarily complete. Anytime you're in any kind of relationship or environment, things have to be built on consent. People don't have the right to take things from you or demand things from you that you do not want to give. And so that is, to me, a huge red flag in any type of environment. And these are the things that I see commonly exploited in places that are spiritually abusive. Now, do all churches do this? No. Again, I don't have to, nor am I willing to preface everything with, well, not all churches do this or not all people do this. You have to be able to think in nuance. Of course, there are healthy churches and spiritual environments out there. But if you find yourself in any one of these three situations where your resources are being demanded and exploited, and um, it's not, it fits the patterns that I've talked about, then you really need to rethink whether that is the environment for you. So I would love to hear from you all in the comments. And my website is skillsetcounseling.com. And I hope you have a wonderful day that's filled with peace. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.